Hey everybody, I'm live. It appears that I'm live, and today is Monday at noon, and we're going to be doing another Freight Broker Bootcamp live, as we always do Monday at noon. I get emails from people all the time. When are you doing the live training? When are you going live? Every Monday at noon, I go live, and today is kind of a special live because while I'm not going to do a specific training, I'm actually going to field questions from you, my community, my current and past students. Anybody who follows me on YouTube or Facebook or is on my email list, feel free. You're going to be able to ask me questions today. Now, I cannot promise that I'm going to be able to answer all those questions because there's going to be a lot of questions, but I appreciate you being here. If you're catching this on replay, hit me up in the chat box below with hashtag replay. I'd love to hear if you're catching this with replay. If you are catching this live, welcome, welcome. Again, today we are going to be doing and focusing in on a live Q&A. So I'm not going to be training on a specific topic. I want to answer your questions. You guys have been coming up with some really good questions lately, and I can't always get to them, but I figured I'd dedicate this live to just Q&A. So that's where we're at, guys. And on the back end of this, all right, at the end of this live, if you stick around to the very end of this live, I'm going to be giving away another one of these t-shirts. It's the Freightpreneur t-shirt. It says, someone who solves problems. I'm on my toes here. Someone who solves problems you don't know you have in ways you can't understand. So I'm going to be giving away another one of these free t-shirts, Freightpreneur. If you're in the United States, then it's going to be absolutely free, no shipping cost. If you're outside of the United States and you want the shirt, you'll have to pay the shipping cost. I'm just a little cheap that way, I guess. But yeah, so I've been giving away a lot of these shirts. People have been really excited about them. I didn't even create them to give them away. I just created it because I thought it was cool, and I ordered a bunch for me, and now everybody wants them. So I'm giving them away on some of these lives, whether it be on YouTube or Facebook. And so it looks like we got quite a few people live here. So that's exciting. So before we dive into this, again, hold your questions until we get started because the stream gets really crazy. And I want to make sure that I don't miss it, okay? So the first thing we're going to start out with is this. I want to give a special shout out to all of my past and current students. For those of you that know me, know that I have a course called Freight Broker Bootcamp, which is the most cost-effective and comprehensive online freight broker training program. Trained over 8,000 students in the last 10 years. Been very, very blessed. Have developed some great relationships. Have helped some people build 6 and 7 and even 8-figure businesses through that course and through my coaching and training. And so ultimately, I want to give a big shout out to you. If you are one of my past or present students, hit me up in the chat box. Let me know. Hashtag FBBC student. Hashtag FBBC, which is Freight Broker Bootcamp. FBBC student. Hit me up in the chat box and let me know who my students are, past or current, people that are actually have taken my course. I want to give a big shout out to you guys because again, you guys have made the commitment, right? You've made the commitment to invest in yourself, to grow, to actually launch and grow a successful freight brokerage. So awesome. Patrick Washington is a current student. We have, oh my God, now they're flooding in. So there's tons of students that are on this. And if you're a first timer, take that into consideration. If you're serious about starting your freight brokerage, go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com. We have a 60-day, 100% money back guarantee. And it's a very comprehensive online training that offers online support, dedicated online support to help you succeed. So awesome. We've got Atari. We've got, Javinder. We've got Luke Armand, we got Bill, we got Joseph, we got Technique, Dispatching, we got Paul, we got Yogi, one of my favorites, Yogi. For those of you that don't know Yogi Goswami, Yogi's a student of mine for a few years now. 2019, he did over $4.8 million in sales. And his life has changed dramatically. You can check out, I did an interview with him on YouTube. You can check that out on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/freight brokers. We have all the interviews and different, video trainings on there as well. So welcome Val, welcome Victor. Awesome. So we got a whole bunch of students. That's awesome. So do me a huge favor. I know we got a bunch of students in here, but before we get started, I want to ask you guys a question. I'm going to take a little bit different strategy today because I really want to understand who you are, right? And who you as a group in my community are. So I'm going to ask you a question. Pay attention, listen really quick here, because here's the question. What do you do for a living? A, you're a truck driver. B, you're a truck driver's spouse. C, you work in logistics, somewhere in the logistics industry, or D, other, and then type other and type the what you do for a living. Okay, so A is you're a truck driver. So what do you do for a living now? I know that you want to be a freight broker. Maybe you're in training to be a freight broker, but I want to know who you are. What do you do now? Are you a truck driver? Are you the spouse of a truck driver? Are you currently working somewhere in logistics? Or do you work in a totally unrelated industry and you're just curious about freight brokering, becoming a freight broker, a freight agent, or the freight industry as a whole? Give me a heads up in the chat box and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I really want to understand who you are. And then I promise we're going to dive into the Q&A right after this. Okay, so hold tight, but hold your questions till the end. I really want to understand. So we've got, okay, geez, holy cow. Things are flying here. So we got Patrick as a truck driver. We've got Scott Thompson's a truck driver. Clint Sawyer is a truck driver. B. Asimos is not in the industry, but is looking to be a freight broker. We got more truck drivers. Jerome owns a trucking business. Leon's a truck driver. Victor works at home. He's a Home Depot supervisor. Congrats, Victor. That's awesome. We've got, oh my gosh, they're flying in. Self-employed, starting as a freight broker. Awesome. All right, so I'm going to go back through these comments afterwards because I really want to understand who you are, and I really appreciate the feedback, okay? Because the better I understand you and who you are, the better I can serve you. And that's what this is all about, right? The reason why you didn't have to pay to be a part of this live training today is because I want to serve you. I want to help you. I want to support your growth. It would be amazing, and you can not imagine how powerful it would be and how it would feel for me to see you succeed as a freight broker, to build a 6-figure, 7-figure, and 8-figure income with freight brokering. It's possible. Trust me. I started with zero experience. I didn't have a clue what a freight broker was, did a little bit of research, started my business. First year, we did 1.2 million in sales. And then year 2, we did 3.6 million in sales, and then 6 million, and then 12 million, then 18 million. You guys know my story. And fortunately, before I sold the company, we did over $80 million in sales the last year. But one of the things I'm most excited about isn't selling the company. One of the things I love the most is teaching and coaching and working with students who are also trying to break away from the 9-to-5 and break away from the grind of not being able to pay their bills and have that freedom. And so ultimately, that's why I love teaching. That's why I do these every Monday. And that's why I have the Freight Broker Bootcamp online course. So thank you, everybody who's a student who's here today. That's awesome. Thank you. And thank you if you're catching this on replay or this is your first time. I love when first timers come into the stream and check things out. So price of admission, as you guys know, is like the stream and make sure you share it. If you share the stream, I'm going to remember those people that share the stream. I always do. I try to always remember those people because I get notified who shares the stream, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be on whatever platform, I'll get notified. And I always try to remember those people and prop them up to the top of the list as it relates to answering questions, support related, and or through these lives. So make sure you share the stream. That's the price of admission. I'm not asking for a credit card. Just share the word. Let everybody know about us. All right. So here we go, guys. I am going to start with some questions. So fire away. I'm going to grab a quick drink while the questions start to roll in. Again, I'm going to disclaim here. Number one, if I murder your name, okay, I apologize. Number two, if I do not get to your question, I apologize. We are going to have a lot of questions today. I promise you there's going to be a ton of questions. I'm going to try to get to everything live. If I can't, I will come back in and try to answer those questions in the stream later this week. But this is your time to ask questions. There are no dumb questions, okay? I will absolutely try to get your question answered. And if I don't know the answer, I'll look it up. I'll figure it out. I'll ask somebody who's smarter than me to get that answer, okay? I don't have the answers to everything. I'm not the smartest guy. And that's good for you because you don't need to be the smartest guy or gal in order to succeed in this business. Trust me, if I did it, you can do it. Okay. So questions. All right. Boom, 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 boom. Let's see. I'm scrolling here. Marie, thank you for referring people to me. That's awesome. Greatly appreciated. All right. What's a good way to, okay. So Clint Sawyer asked, what's a good way to find a carrier, a backhaul after they deliver your load to keep them moving? All right. So it's an interesting question. So let me explain the dynamics because we have a whole range of people from newbies to experienced people. So Clint has a load moving from Buffalo to Atlanta. He finds a carrier in Buffalo. They pick up the load. Maybe it's an owner operator. The owner operator delivers in Atlanta, and now the freight is off his truck. And what Clint would like to do is would like to, number one, help that driver with his next load. And number two, if he is able to help that driver move to another destination, then he's probably going to make some money because he's going to broker that truck at that point. The challenge is, Clint, unless you have freight out of that market where your customer that delivered into that market maybe has returns, or whether you've prospected in that market, in that area where you found customers that have outbound freight, it can sometimes be challenging because the fact is you're not going to be able to double broker that truck, meaning you're not going to be able to just go to a load board, find a broker, and then broker that truck. Now you could help him and connect him with another broker, but most brokers on a load board are not posting their loads so another broker can call them. They want the carrier to call direct. So one way you could help him is just direct him to brokers that have freight out of Atlanta, but you're not going to make any money doing that. The way that you can leverage that opportunity to make money is when you have lanes that you run very regularly. Let's say, for example, you run, Buffalo to Atlanta 2 or 3 times a week. And it's a very consistent lane for you because you got a shipper out of Buffalo and they move that lane all the time. What you might want to do if you've got consistent freight out of there is you might want to start prospecting in the Atlanta area and find another shipper that moves out of Atlanta and maybe comes back to Buffalo or goes to another destination where your carrier base wants to go to, maybe somewhere in the Northeast or wherever they're domiciled, right? So there's no easy answer here, right? I know what you're looking for, but the problem is as a broker, you're not going to be able to double broker a truck to another broker unless you have a co-broker agreement. And that's going to be kind of unique, especially, when you have these random destinations. So there's 2 ways you can do it. One, you could direct them to a broker who has loads. Maybe you could help them on the load boards and just kind of help the carrier out, which would be great because, again, they're a partner of yours and they'll appreciate that. Or number 2, you can prospect in that market and start developing freight out of that market so that you can then take that truck and try to move it from the drop location to the next pickup location, and then they can pick up another load for you. So that's the long, short version of the answer. So I hope that helps, Clint. Good question. Thank you. Now I got to find you in this mess of comments to try to get that removed. All right, so I'm going to scroll back down through here. All right, good question. Here's a question from FX Team Takeover. What's better, freight broker or freight dispatcher, and why? Okay, well, I don't teach freight dispatching. Let's take that off the table because I don't teach that because I personally believe that based upon the definition of a freight broker and the law as it stands today, that independent dispatchers that work for owner operators or small fleets, my personal opinion is it's unauthorized brokering. You're brokering without a license. The definition of a broker. Now you're going to have people that are going to argue with me about that. You're going to have other people that are selling training around freight dispatch. I don't do that. Here's why. Because I believe it's unauthorized brokering. The definition of a broker is someone who arranges transport between a shipper and a carrier and is compensated for it. As a dispatcher, that's exactly what you are doing, very similar to a broker. So I believe independent dispatchers are basically brokering freight without an authority. Okay, now, if you are a independent dispatcher and you have your freight broker authority, That's different because now you legally have the ability to be compensated. So if you want to be a freight dispatcher, you're definitely going to at least have to have your freight broker authority, even if you're not going to focus on getting your own shippers and you're really just focused on the carrier side. So get that off the beginning. Now, freight broker, the reason why I like freight brokering is because now you control your own destiny. You are going to be doing business direct with shippers, and you are going to be compensated based upon your efforts, not necessarily just based upon the freight that a specific carrier wants you to get for them. So I like brokering. I like becoming either a freight. I wish this question was, which is better, freight broker or freight agent? And the answer to that is both. Freight broker, if you've got some experience and maybe a little bit more capital to get started. Freight agent, if you have limited experience and you don't have a whole lot of capital, because it's very low cost, very low risk in order to get started as a freight agent. So I know that may not be the answer you were looking for, but I got to be honest. I got to keep it real. That's the reality. Okay. So I hope that helps. All right. Here's a good question from Let's Go Places. What is a good pay structure for hiring an inside sales rep? All right, awesome. So there are a variety of different ways that I have hired inside salespeople. Okay. You obviously have, I'm going to give you a couple of the major ones, right? So typically you're going to give them some sort of a low base plus a variable comp, which is a commission structure. So you may give them a $25,000 to $35,000 a year base, depending upon your geography, where you're located, the type of job, all that sort of stuff. So let's call it a $25,000 to $35,000 a year base plus commission, right? And that commission structure can vary depending upon the roles they're playing. If they're actually getting their own customers and moving their own loads, then the commission is going to be much higher. If they're just doing the sales and then you have operations people that are handling the back end and finding trucks and dispatching and doing all that, then they're going to get a little bit lower commission, but they also don't have to do that job. So it also depends on their roles and responsibilities. The more responsibility they have, the bigger part that they play in that transaction, the more the commission will be. Now that's version one, right? That's a low base, high variable comp. Number two would be hiring them on straight commission, right? Hiring them on straight commission. It's not unusual to have someone that comes on and has maybe does training with you for 90 days. You pay them X dollars per hour during training. And then after 90 days, they're on straight commission. They have a guaranteed minimum of minimum wage, of course, in order to be legal, depending upon what your state is. But ultimately, then you put them on a high variable comp. So that might be somewhere along the lines of, a much higher commission. You might pay that person if they're actually moving the loads. Again, if they're getting their own shipper and moving the loads and acting as a broker, but working inside your organization, you might pay them somewhere between 20 and 40%. Depending upon what their role, what their job is, right? So if they're just doing operations, then you'll give them a piece of that. If they're doing the sales, you'll give them a piece of that. If they're doing both and actually brokering, but they're working under you inside your organization as an employee, then you can also do straight commission, okay? So that's another opportunity. And those are the two that you're probably going to see most often. Now, I can't give you exact numbers because every market is different. Right. And I don't know the roles and responsibilities that you are planning on having this person have. Right. If they're just doing sales, you typically will give them a recurring commission on every load that's moved for the lifetime of that client. That commission rate may go down after year one or year two because you want to keep that salesperson hungry and prospecting for new business. You don't want them to get content making a certain amount of money. You want them to, number one, retain the clients, but number two, you also want them to grow their book and continue to grow their income. So there's a little bit of feedback. I hope that helps. All right, next question. Here's a good question from B. Azimov. Do freight forwarders work with freight brokers or only with carriers? This is a great question. Believe it or not, freight forwarders work with both freight forwarders and carriers. Now, Mainly freight forwarders work directly with other carriers or, other providers. That could be air. It depends on if they're an air freight forwarder, an ocean freight forwarder, if they're doing over the road. But they will typically work, in most cases, they're going to work direct with other providers, other direct providers, right? Other assets. But in many cases, they will work with brokers. Perfect example of that is with freight that comes in and out of ports. So they may work with a broker on the last mile. If you have a load container that comes into Jacksonville to the port in Jacksonville, Florida, and they may want, rather than sourcing carriers out of there to move that container, they may work with a broker to handle all those containers out of Jacksonville going to their different customer destinations. So the brokers may handle a part of that transaction. So that would be more like a co-brokering type relationship. But everything would have to be transparent. Obviously, the freight forwarder would need to know that you're operating as a broker, and obviously you would know that they were operating as a freight forwarder. So those are the two ways. I think primarily freight forwarders will go direct to asset-based carriers and providers, but it's not unusual for them to partner with brokers. And the reason why they do that is because they have a large volume of freight and they don't want to hire an enormous amount of salaried employees, because sometimes that freight will spike up during different times of the year and sometimes it will go down. When it's spiked up, they don't mind having extra employees and extra hands to put into the pot. But when the freight goes down, they don't want to have all that fixed cost of having employees with a large salary or variable comp or benefits, insurance, 401k, that sort of stuff. So a lot of times they will partner and co-broker with brokers in order to handle that excess flow, right? In order to handle those peaks and growth periods when it's too hard, they don't have time to hire, or it's too expensive to hire an inside person. So hope that helps. All right, I'm scrolling here. All right, so Amanda has a question. What are all the factors involved in brokers calculating a rate? Okay, I don't know that I can hit every factor, but I'm going to hit the primary ones, and hopefully this is going to answer your question. The number one thing you have to understand when determining freight rates is that freight rates are not determined by shippers. They're not even determined by carriers, and they're not determined by brokers. Here's what determines a freight rate. What a load of widgets costs to go from point A to point B is determined by supply and demand. And what I mean by that is, in any given market, let's look at that example I shared earlier, a van load from Buffalo to Atlanta, right? Easy example. If I had a load from Buffalo to Atlanta, what would determine the rate of that load from Buffalo to Atlanta would be not what the shipper says or wants to pay, because that may be what they want to pay or maybe what they paid in the past or what they think it's worth. But the reality is that the market determines that. So I would look in Buffalo and I would look at the density of trucks to loads looking to go to Atlanta, right? So if there's more trucks than there are loads looking to go towards Atlanta, then the rate is going to go down, because there's a larger supply of trucks than there is freight. Okay. So when there's more capacity than there are orders, then that's going to drive competition and it's going to drive the rates down. Now, the opposite of that is, if there is more freight than there is trucks, now there's going to be higher competition for those trucks, and that is going to cause the rates to go up. So if you think about the supply and demand of freight, of trucks to loads in and out of any market, that is what ultimately determines the freight rates. Now, the best way to determine that is load boards, right? So if you have a load board like the DAT or a Truck Stop or other well-known load boards that have a density of trucks and loads being posted, you're going to be able to very quickly go in there and determine, are there any trucks in the Buffalo market? Are there any vans in the Buffalo market? And are there any vans looking to go into that general Atlanta area, maybe Georgia or the surrounding area? And if there are not a lot of trucks, not a lot of vans in Buffalo looking to go that way, you know the rates are probably going to be a little bit higher. But if there's a lot of trucks looking to hit that lane, you also know now the rates are going to go a little bit lower. So ultimately, the biggest variable, Amanda, that you need to understand is the supply and demand of trucks. And just so you know, that is the same for everything, right? That is economics 101. If there's only one mouse, right? This is my computer mouse. If there's only one mouse in Erie County where I live in New York, okay? If there's only one mouse available for a computer and I own that mouse is going to be worth a lot of money. But if there's a warehouse filled with hundreds of thousands of computer mice, whatever you want to call them, that price is going to go way down because there's a huge supply, probably more of a supply than there is demand. So I just wanted to use that as an example outside of trucking, but supply and demand is what drives any given market. All right. So I hope that helps. All right. Another good question. Self Styles asks, can you do this remotely from Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth? Absolutely. I have students who have started their business in Italy, UK, India, Australia, Canada, Mexico, Honduras, right? I have people all over the country that are operating as freight brokers and freight agents legally. So you absolutely can. The coolest part about becoming a freight broker or freight agent is your geography really doesn't matter. What matters is you understand the fundamentals of how to make sure you are compliant as a broker and as an agent. So that's part of what we go over in the course. You understand the primary functions of how to generate rates, kind of what we just talked about, how to dispatch trucks, how to find trucks through load boards, right? How to do billing and how to do collections and how to do all those core functions, how to hire people like we talked about. So if you understand those core fundamentals, you can build a brokerage from anywhere, right? As long as you have internet access and you have phones. And that's pretty much a given almost anywhere, unless you are in a really, really, really depressed area, at which point even there, I think the opportunity may still be possible. But of course, you're going to need access to phones and you're going to need internet access and you're going to need some training. And that's why I put together freightbrokerbootcamp.com. So hope that helps. All right, so this is a big question, but I'm going to answer it because I think it will open up the eyes of a bunch of people. What is the process? What does the whole transaction look like when freight brokering? Okay, so let me explain to you. I'm going to give it to you in kind of a chronological order. Freight broker contacts shipper. That's number one. Freight broker then provides a freight rate, a freight quote based on that shipper's specific needs. Let's use that Buffalo to Atlanta example. I provide them a freight quote, they accept that rate, and then they give me a load. They tender me a load, right? Which is almost like a purchase offer, but they just send me over the details of the load, pickup date, pickup location, drop date, drop location, details about the freight. They're going to send that to me. Once I get that information, I am then going to enter that information into a load board like a DAT, a DAT, or a freight, or a truck stop. I'll also enter that into my TMS, which is my transportation management software. From there, I need to find a carrier that can move that freight for slightly less than what the shipper is paying me. So if the shipper, just for easy math, is paying me $1,000, it would be more than that for Buffalo to Atlanta, but $1,000. And I can find a carrier that's willing to move that for $850, I will be able to make $150 profit on that load. Now, sometimes I'll make 200, sometimes I'll make 250, sometimes I'll make 100, but it's usually somewhere in the range of a 10 to 20% profit margin, okay? Once I find that carrier, then I will then make sure that carrier and the carrier signs my broker carrier agreement and sends me back the proper paperwork in order to make sure that they're set up and I vetted them properly. We will then send a rate confirmation, which is basically like a little one-page document, almost like a little mini contract that says that they agree to move this load with these specific details from point A to point B for this rate. And then after that's completed, on the day of the load picking up, we would dispatch the driver into the pickup location, make sure that they were there on time. They would then get loaded. The driver would then drive to the delivery, to the destination. If it's a multi-day load where it takes 2 or 3 days, you wouldn't be able to go to Buffalo, Atlanta probably overnight. It would be a 2-day load. The broker would then do at least one check call per day, meaning they would reach out to the carrier, make sure that things are still going well, make sure that there's no issues, no delays. And then at that point, the driver is going to deliver the load to the delivery location. And upon delivery of that load, the receiver of that freight is going to sign the bill of lading, which is the paperwork that the shipper gave the driver at the point of origin. They're going to sign that. And that's the chain of custody then transfers from the driver to the owner of that freight, or to the receiver, right, of that freight. And then that transaction is done. That carrier will then send his invoice for $850 to me with a copy of that bill of lading. I will then enter that invoice into my accounting system. I will then create an invoice for my shipper for $1,000, and I will send him that bill of lading, that signed document, as well as any other shipping related documents. I'll send it to the shipper, and then the shipper then pays me. That's the basic transaction. That's the flow of the transaction. Okay. So I hope that defines it. That's really very granular, step by step process from the freight quote all the way to invoicing your shipper. So I hope that helped. Hey, if that helped you guys, type in the chat box and let me know, because I want to make sure. Maybe I'll do a video specifically about the process. I don't know that I've ever done a step-by-step video on YouTube or a live training about that. But if you think that would be valuable, give me an idea of somewhere between 1 and 10. 1 meaning, you don't really think that's interesting. 10 meaning you think that would be a great idea. Good question. Okay, so Jeremy asked a question. Do you bid lanes all in, or is fuel surcharge added after? Good question. So it depends upon how the shipper wants their rates. So you'll ask the shipper. A lot of times it will be an all-in flat rate, which will include your line haul plus your fuel surcharge. So you may give them a rate from Buffalo to Atlanta that says it's $1,500 all in, right? Whatever, just an example. Or you may give that to them saying it's, let's say it's 1,000 miles. I don't know what the miles are. I'm just using an example. And we're going to charge you $1.25 a mile plus fuel surcharge. And then there would be a fuel surcharge, sheet based upon the price of fuel at any given point, which would then determine what the fuel surcharge is, right? Per mile or as a percentage of the overall line haul. So the answer to that, Jeremy, is it depends on how your shipper wants the rates. That's an important question you may want to ask them. When they give you an opportunity to quote on a load, you may want to ask them, do you want a freight plus fuel type of a quote, or do you want an all-in rate? Some shippers want an all-in rate. Higher volume, larger shippers are typically going to be looking for a freight plus fuel, just to give you a little bit of a tip. Smaller shippers, in many cases, just want an all-in rate. Okay. And that's not exclusively, that's not 100%, but as a general rule, that's what you'll see. Okay. Good question. Thank you. All right. Here's a question from Byron Ford. When starting up, do you want to reach out to carriers for shippers? I'm not sure that that's the right question. Restate the question, Byron, because I don't think that's a question that you were really trying to ask. So as a follow-up to Let's Go Places, they asked about how to pay an inside salesperson. You got to understand, it's subjective, right? The commission rate is going to be very subjective. If you're doing a base pay, it's going to be determined by your base pay. So if you have a higher base pay, then it could be a lower commission. If you have a lower base pay, then it'd be a higher commission. I can't give you that answer. I can tell you that we would pay when I first had my brokerage and we were not an agent-based brokerage and I had inside salespeople and they were just doing sales, in many cases I would pay them as much as 5% the first year of the profit on any load. So if if there was $100 in profit, they would get a $5 commission on that load as just the salesperson plus their base. And then I think we would move that down after year 1 or year 2, and it could go down to as low as 2 or 3%, right? So it'll usually be single digit percentages if they are a salesperson on salary. But again, if they're on a low salary, you may want to give them a little higher commission. You can also tier it, when they only get commission after they hit a certain level. You can increase the commission based on certain performance levels. There's all kinds of things you can do there, but I don't think there's an exact right or wrong answer. It's subjective, but I hope you can take what I gave you and apply it. All right, so here's a good question by Atari Thomas. Should one find a niche and go, or different niches and dive in? My personal opinion is, and you guys, for those of you that know me, riches are in niches, whether that be in the freight industry or almost any industry, right? I am a very niche guy. I believe in niching down and being an expert and a valuable resource in that niche versus a jack of all trades, master of none. Okay. So let me get that off my chest from the very beginning. That's important that you understand that. Now, I believe as a startup, if you are a startup broker or a startup agent, you should focus on one niche to get started. Now, that niche, you are going to focus on doing due diligence and research on rates and carriers and shippers and leads and prospects. And that includes a lot of online research. That also includes a lot of phone calls that you're going to have to make in order to try to figure out exactly what's going on inside that niche, right? Because there's no handbook for every niche, because every niche is different based upon the supply and demand of freight, depends upon the actual type of equipment, depends on all kinds of variables, seasonality, the whole 9 yards. So as far as niches go, I believe that startups should focus on one niche. Now, if one of two things happen. If after a period of time, you do not believe that that niche is viable for you, you can then switch to another niche. Okay. And on the other side of that coin, if you develop that niche and it becomes very profitable, you can eventually expand into other niches. But I'm a big believer in working on one niche at a time. Don't try to go wide. I'd rather go deep, right? So that requires some due diligence. There's all kinds of different niches out there. I've talked about that before. You can do niches based on industries, based on equipment, based on geography, based on hybrids, right? Based upon high touch, low touch. There's all kinds of things you can do as far as freight niches, but I hope that helps. Here's a question. Maria asked, what's the best to use to find freight rates? I'm on FreightWaves. In my experience, the best data comes from either the rating tools on the DAT, or on TruckStop. I'm not quite sure about FreightWaves. It may be great, but I don't have any personal experience with it. So that's my answer, right? Now, those rates that you're going to get on the DAT and on TruckStop are not always going to be 100% accurate, just so you know. What they do is they gather market data dynamically as truckloads move, as freight moves from point A to point B. They're gathering rating data. They're gathering the data that brokers are paying carriers. They're gathering data that shippers are paying brokers. They're gathering data throughout the industry to try to compile and market intelligence about rates for different types of equipment, different types of geography, different lanes, different niches. Okay. So, I can tell you that you're typically going to find the companies that have the most data, in many cases, are going to also have the best data, right? But even that data is not going to be 100% accurate, but it is an important tool in order for you to understand the fundamentals of how freight moves and how to start rating it. So I hope that helps. So here's a question. We want to know the best entity structure. Okay, so I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. I don't play one on TV. I've paid many of them. I have some that still work for me today, but I can't give you an answer, a legal question. Here's what I can tell you, that most brokers will either, startup brokers will either set up as an S corporation or as an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. You're going to want one of those two things. The reason being is because you will then a corporation limits your liability to the assets of the company, which means that in most cases, if something were to go wrong and you were to get sued for God knows whatever reason, right? They can only sue you for the assets of that corporation. They can't go after you personally. Like they can't go after your home, right? Or your personal assets or your personal bank account. That's the general rule, okay? So I would say that most brokers get started as either an LLC or an S Corp. My suggestion would be for you to talk to an accountant and to get some feedback from them, and they'll be able to explain to you. You can even go online and do some research, the difference between an LLC and an S Corp. There's some very small differences there, but they are distinct and individual differences you might want to check out. You're definitely not going to want a C Corp, because a C Corp typically is someone who's out raising money, who needs the ability to raise capital. You're also going to get taxed twice, right? You got a corporate tax, plus you're going to have to pay your income tax out of the money that comes out of there. So in most cases, you're going to see it's going to be an LLC or an S Corp. Hope that helps. Good question, Victor. How often do I have to call the shipper that gave me positive answer at first call? Well, a little bit subjective, could be challenging to answer this, but let me draw a scenario. You call the shipper and the shipper said, sure, I'm interested. What do you have to say? And at that point, you tell him what you do, you tell him how you can help him. And then he says, okay, send over some information. And you send over information. And then a day goes by, a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, and you haven't heard anything from that shipper. Well, here's the reason why. He didn't tell you he was going to do business with you. He didn't agree to give you loads. What happened was he just said he was interested and willing to hear you out and get some information. So in sales, there's an old adage, right? The fortune's in the follow-up. The answer to your question is you continue to follow up with that shipper until they start giving you orders. And in most cases, you're going to have to, number one, the first call, you're going to build some relationship and rapport. You're going to gather some sales intelligence. Maybe you can even give them a quote for a few lanes that they run regularly. But they're not going to be able to tell you yes or no until they get a freight quote from you, right? Because it's going to be price sensitive, just like anything. They're not going to give you carte blanche. Even if they are interested in having another broker as an asset to work to help them solve their logistics problems, you're still going to have to give them a quote. So first you build rapport, then you give them some rates. And then from there, you're going to negotiate yes or no. They're going to tell you, no, those are high, or sure, those look great. And at that point, they're going to tend you freight. So the answer to your question is you are going to follow up until they start giving you orders. And then after they give you an order and you move that freight, now the second part of that is once they are a customer and you've moved a load for them, and you are now part of approved vendor for them, and you're invoicing them, and you've got a relationship, you've done one load. The answer to that question is how often are you going to call them? How often are you going to follow up with them? Here's what I can tell you. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. In most cases, brokers will either email or call their customers daily after they've been established. Now, some shippers are going to say, listen, you don't need to call me every day. Call me on Mondays. I'll know exactly what we have for the week. They'll tell you how they want you to follow up with them, right? And so, but just because you have one lane and you're moving maybe one lane with them that runs once a week, that doesn't mean you can't search for other opportunities. So initially, you're going to follow up until you start getting regular orders. And then once you get those orders and they're established as a customer, at that point, you're definitely going to want to continue to follow up with them, but it's going to be a little bit more customized based upon how they want you to follow up and how the orders come in for their organization. In many cases, I had clients that would give me next week's orders. They'd get on a Wednesday, they would send me the orders for next week, and I'd know exactly what's going on next week. So I wouldn't need to call them about next week's freight. But if we didn't talk on Wednesday, then I probably wouldn't have gotten that freight. So in a lot of cases, brokers will either email or call their customers every day, or they will do it based upon how the shipper requests that they follow up. Follow up every Monday, follow up every Friday, send me an email every day. I'll call you, don't call me. They're going to tell you how they want to be followed up. So good question, Victor. Thank you. All right, I'm going to grab a quick drink here as you guys continue to throw some questions in. We're going to go for a little bit longer. We've answered a lot of questions today, which is great. And I've been able to get into depth on a lot of those questions. So I hope you guys are enjoying this. If you guys are enjoying this Q&A, give me a heads up. Let me know. Type in there more Q&A. Hit something in the chat box and let me know you want to do more Q&A in the future. And I will try to set aside different lives where we don't cover a specific topic always, but we'll just dive into these Q&As. So if you guys are enjoying this, make sure you type in the chat box. And again, if you're curious about becoming a freight broker, right? If you're curious about becoming a freight broker or a freight agent, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Over 8,000 students over the last decade. I've personally done over $200 million as a freight broker. We offer a 60-day, 100% money back guarantee. And we offer dedicated online support. So you're definitely not going to be disappointed. Check that out if you're curious about becoming a freight broker or freight agent. Okay. So let's see what else we got. I'm scrolling here. The Patriot Marine, again, as always, thank you for your service. Has a question. I don't typically dive into politics, but this is more economic, so I'm gonna give you a perspective on it. How will the Biden win affect the freight industry in America? New Mexico, Canada, USMCA agreement. It's an interesting question, and it's challenging to answer that question. Here's what I can tell you. I think ultimately the economy is going to continue to move forward, right? We still have a lot of demand for the goods and services that we provide. And as the pandemic and COVID continue to eventually wean and go away over time, our economy and GDP will get back to normal. It's rapidly going back in that direction. It has been for months now, as well as unemployment. But as far as freight goes, I think freight will follow that. Freight will follow based upon demand, just like anything else, supply and demand. Now, where there could be a little bit sticky, obviously, is corporate taxes, right? So if corporations have less profit to reinvest into their business for marketing and sales and R&D, that could affect GDP long-term. As a matter of fact, I think economists are expecting GDP to go down slightly based upon higher taxes for the American public, particularly corporate taxes. But the interesting thing now is that we're in a global economy where, while most of our goods and services are purchased internally here in the United States, we're a big consumer because we have over 300 million people in this country. The global economy continues to evolve, right? Amazon and other the world has gotten smaller because of the internet. So I think there are going to be new opportunities, in other markets, right? Obviously, we never know exactly what China is going to do. And again, I'm not a politician. I'm just giving you a little bit of perspective. But what I see for freight in the long-term future is growth. And the reason why, the biggest indicator of freight growth is the population, right? So as the population of the world continues to grow day after day after day after day after year, right? The population is not stagnant. It's not going down. It's growing rapidly. India, China, the UK, Australia, Africa, South America, the global population is growing rapidly, as is the population in the US. And as that population grows, they're going to consume more foods and goods and foods. They're going to also they're going to need homes. They're going to need infrastructure. And so that's a good place to be as a business, which is, the fundamentals that drive and supply the human demand and the growth of our population. So that's one of the reasons why I love the freight and logistics industry, is because, we're not out there digging for gold, but we're selling the shovels. That's a great example, right? We're not out there digging for gold. We're not creating the next Facebook. We're not creating the big next tech platform or the Google, where it's very high risk, high reward. We are selling shovels. We're not digging for gold. So I consider freight brokers and freight agents one of those businesses that was like when the gold rush took place in California, hundreds of years ago, where, they had all these guys going out and speculating and prospecting in California. Most of them never made a dime or even found gold, but the people that supplied the shovels and supplied all the goods that they needed in order to actually set up their mines and to actually mine for gold, those are the people that made money. And that's how I look at freight brokering. So a little bit of an off tangent, but I hope that helps. Question from a Facebook user. Can you gain customers by emailing only? Probably not. Probably not. Very hard to develop a relationship and trust and rapport through email. Can it be a way to start a conversation? Absolutely. Can it be a way to communicate and answer specific questions? Absolutely. But the chances of you getting a customer exclusively through email is probably very low. You're at some point, you're going to have to pick up the phone. You're going to have to talk to them on the phone, or you're going to have to meet them face to face. Most cases, it'll be over the phone. Here's a good question from Patrick Washington. Last week I think it was last week or in a recent lesson, I talked about jump ball freight, which is where shippers, when they have a load list that they send out to a big list of carriers and brokers, but they're not dedicating it to any one. They're just going to give it to the first person who covers that load. I said and believe truly that is a huge waste of time. So I'm quickly rehashing that. So the answer to Patrick is, how do you get around that? Very simple. You find people that don't operate that way. Some shippers do that. Most shippers don't. Smart shippers don't. Unsophisticated shippers do, right? Or people that are very rate sensitive will a lot of times do jump ball freight because they're looking for the cheapest rate. They're not concerned about service, which is not where you want to play. You want to find shippers that are willing to dedicate freight and lanes and loads to you, 100% exclusive based upon that specific lane or load. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to give you all the freight, but it may mean they're going to give you that specific load. Every day they have a load moving from Buffalo to Atlanta, and you're going to get that load. You become dedicated on that. It makes the rate very predictable. It makes the service very predictable, and it allows you to make a profit while serving your customer. So the only thing you can do, there's no way around it, other than if you were to find somebody who doesn't do jump ball freight, or if you contact that shipper that does jump ball freight. There is one exception to that. If you contact that shipper that does jump ball freight because they sent out the loads to you and you saw lanes that you could cover very cost effectively at a high level of service, you could then reach out to them and explain to that shipper why it's smarter for them, why it's more economically, a better economic decision and a service decision for them to actually dedicate that freight to you. And you'll explain why. And then maybe they will actually give you those loads and not force you to be in a jump ball situation. In many cases, jump ball freight is not 100% of their providers. Sometimes they will have providers that do get dedicated freight, but then they'll have other lanes that they don't have dedicated providers on, which is where the jump ball freight goes. So I hope that makes sense. For those of you that are curious about, jump ball freight or load lists, I think the training I did was last week. You can go to my YouTube channel. And you can check that out, youtube.com/freight brokers. I did an entire training about load lists and jump ball freight and all that sort of stuff. I don't remember the exact title, but ultimately it was a really popular training. So good question, Patrick. Appreciate it. Ooh, it just scrolled. Sorry, guys. I'm scrolling. I'm going to do two more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up for today. And then I'm going to do a giveaway at the end. Again, I am going to do a giveaway. I'm going to give away one of these Freightpreneur shirts, okay? So hold tight for the giveaway. All right, so Rodney has an interesting question. Is there a way to research shippers' primary lanes to prep for a cold call with a quote? No, not in my experience. The only way you're going to understand their lanes and understand the routes that they run and their specific needs is to get on the phone with them and to ask questions, right? And in many cases, you're just going to ask for a bid or a lane package, at which point they're typically going to send you some sort of a Google sheet or an Excel spreadsheet. And then at that point, that's going to give you the lanes and the equipment that they use and the requirements that they have. But there's typically not any place that you're going to be able to go to in order to gather market intelligence or gather sales intelligence about their specific lanes before a cold call. So that's an interesting question. I thought I would answer that. Let's do one more, and then we're going to do the giveaway. If you hear my dog in the background, I apologize. He's going crazy. Must be somebody at the door. Yeah, here's a good question from Rico. How long does it take for carriers to complete and return a carrier packet when you're booking a load? You can lose on loads waiting too long. Okay, well, again, if you are doing jump ball freight, like I've instructed you, asked you, and coached you not to do, then yes, you can lose out on loads. But if you're not doing jump ball freight and the freight is dedicated to you, you're not going to lose it just because one carrier doesn't get the paperwork back. Now, I started that way because I think it's important, Rico, that you do not focus on jump ball freight. It's a waste of time. It's a guaranteed way to lose money and waste time, right? Very rarely are you ever going to cover freight that's jump ball freight going out to a list of a bunch of different providers, okay? You need to find providers that are dedicating the freight to you and they're tendering that load only to you. Now, to answer your question, how long does it take for a carrier to complete and return a carrier packet? It varies, right? Some carriers will get that packet back to you in 5 minutes. Some carriers might take hours. You as the broker have to make sure that getting that carrier packet set up, let's say, for example, a load's going to pick up today at 3:00 and it's 1:00 right now, we need to turn that carrier packet around very quickly. So when you're on the phone negotiating with the carrier and you guys come up with a rate and you agree you're going to move the load together, you need to let them know, I need this back in 5 minutes or I can't run the load with you. Are you going to be able to turn the paperwork around? Yes or no? Yes, or I won't be able to have it in 5 minutes, but I can have it back to you in 15. If they don't have the package back to you, your broker carrier agreement and all the paperwork you need, then you need to follow up with them and call them. And if they do not respond, then you need to find another carrier because there is no guarantee until that paperwork is done, right? So ultimately, you need to define that with your carrier during the negotiations, especially if it's a last second load, like you need a load that's picking up at 3 or 4 o'clock today and it's 1:00 right now, you're going to need to turn that paperwork very quickly. So you need to be very specific with that carrier. They have to turn that paper around quickly or you can't use them. It's really simple. You're just going to give it. And in some cases, if they're really interested in the load, they're going to turn it around because they know that if they don't give you the paperwork, you're not going to give them a rate confirmation. And if you don't give them a rate confirmation, they don't have the load and they want the load. So if they're serious, they'll turn it around quickly. Good question. All right. So now we're going to do the giveaway. Who wants a Freightpreneur shirt? Who wants a Freightpreneur shirt? Type in the chat box, #Freightpreneur. No. Let me take that back. Type #FreightBrokerBootcamp. #FreightBrokerBootcamp. All one word. If you type that in the chat box, it's going to qualify you for the giveaway. And I'm going to give it away live right now. I'm going to give it away. So type in the chat box, #FreightBrokerBootcamp in the comments below, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on YouTube, wherever you're at, type that in the chat box. And I am going to select one of you randomly, okay? Randomly to get one of these Freightpreneur t-shirts. I shipped out 2 last week. I forgot, Cindy Kane was a winner of one of the shirts, and Juanita Owens was another winner of one of the shirts. So who's going to be the winner today? Again, if you're in the United States, it's going to be absolutely free, no cost for the shirt or shipping. I'm going to cover that. If you're outside of the United States, Canada, Mexico, other country, you may have to pay the cost of shipping if you really want the shirt. Again, the shipping cost may be more expensive than the shirt if it's international, but if you're in the US, I am going to cover it. Okay. So we've got some people. We're going to give one more minute for people to qualify here for the contest. In the meantime, listen, every Monday at noon, I do these Freight Broker Bootcamp lives, right? So if you're a student, make sure you're here. If you're taking the course, make sure you're here. It's a great opportunity to learn things above and beyond what's in the training. It's a great time for you to be able to answer questions as you saw today. And it makes you accountable, right? It keeps you moving forward, because sometimes you can get caught up. There'll be a week or two that'll go by and you haven't focused on your training. You haven't focused on doing the things you need to do to get your business set up. And I look at these Mondays as a great way for you to keep yourself accountable. And I'll try to keep you accountable. If you're serious and you're here every week, check in and say, hey, I'm here again. So I'd love to hear from you every single week. The people that are the most educated about their craft are typically the people that are the most successful long-term. So I hope that helps. If you're curious about becoming a freight broker, check out freightbrokerbootcamp.com. I can't tell you anything more. 60-day, 100% money back guarantee. I can't make it any easier. It's 100% risk-free. Okay. All right. So here we go. I am last second here. If you're serious, type in the chat box here, Freight Broker Bootcamp, hashtag Freight Broker Bootcamp. I am actually, wow. Holy cow. Wow. This is awesome. Love it. I'm glad you guys like these shirts. Maybe I'll offer them in a way that you guys can get them online. I don't know. Maybe you'll just be able to order them yourself at some point. I'm going to scroll. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to scroll through the feed, and wherever my mouse hits, okay, I'm going to start at the top for the people that responded first. I'm going to scroll down through the feed. Wherever my mouse hits, the person that's that I hit on that has the term hashtag Freight Broker Bootcamp, you are going to be the winner. So here we go. I am at the top and I'm scrolling. The winner is Eduardo Rosales. Eduardo Rosales is the winner of the Freightpreneur t-shirt. We had 2 women the last 2 weeks, and now we've got Eduardo as the newest winner of the Freightpreneur t-shirt. Thanks everybody for being here. Eduardo, make sure you message me on the Freight Broker Bootcamp Facebook page, your name, address, and your size, right? Your phone number as well, please. Name, address, size, phone number. Let me know if you're already a student or whether it's something that you're just considering becoming a student. Send me a message on freightbrokerbootcamp.com through the message section. Make sure you send that information to me. I will get your shirt out here in the next week. We will definitely mail it to you. Big thanks to everybody who joined me live. Truly appreciate it. If there's topics that you would like to hear about, like me to do training on in the future, type them in the chat box now. I'm going to sign off, but you guys can still continue to type them in the chat box, and I will use some of those topics for future trainings. Most of the topics that I talk about come from you, my students, and from the fans and the followers and the people that are a part of my community. So appreciate all the feedback. Appreciate you being here. Again, every big shout out to all my students for hashtag FBBC. Really appreciate you being here. Everybody else who's a first timer, make sure you come back Mondays at noon, and we'll see you next week.